Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu inna wa'da Allahi haqq. فلا تغرنكم الحياة الدنيا ولا يغرنكم بالله الغرور. O humanity, O mankind, indeed Allah's promise is true. So don't let the life of this world deceive you, and don't be deceived by the chief deceiver, the devil himself. May Allah protect us all. Notice Allah is addressing all of humanity. It's a wake-up call that's universal. And there are different types of deception people go through. You may notice this at a personal or social level. Number one, you hear from people a deception about time. I'll pray when I'm older. I'll give charity next year. I'll go to Hajj sometime in the future, although this person is able to, and they have the money and the health today. And so slowly this person keeps thinking, what? I have more time, I have more time. Time slips away, promise by promise. But also there's a deception of wealth. So, for example, you have people who are building for this world, chasing, and they're never satisfied. So they sacrifice time in the masjid, time with family, time with their children, time for ilm. They sacrifice all of it with the excuse of what? I have to keep building, I have to keep chasing. It's the next hustle, it's the next building, it's the next job. And they're never satisfied. And there are, of course, realities that we can observe. The building of empires that will eventually turn to dust, or saving for a future that may never arrive. But also, there's another type of deception. And that's where shaitan comes in with ideologies, like atheism and other types of ideologies where people doubt, or people wonder. And so they start to say, this life is all there is. Live your best life now. You only live once, when in fact, your soul will move on, you'll continue to live, and then there's eternity. And so the greatest deceiver here in this ayah, وَلَا يَغُرَّنَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغَرُورِ, is the devil himself. So for some people, he tricks them into thinking there's no creator. But look at the universe around you and the countless signs and the natural laws and the fine-tuning and beauty itself and the miracle of the Quran and the proofs of prophethood and the fitrah and natural disposition. When the devil tricks a person into thinking there's no afterlife, he's gained victory over them. Because this person will no longer care about consequences, about a divine moral command, about a day of eternity. But also there's another deception, and it's a type of retirement theory. And so this is when the devil tricks certain segments of the world to think that God created them but is not involved in their lives and doesn't care for them, or that he abandoned them. And of course this is far from the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you think this world was created aimlessly? فَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Who answers your dua? Who accepts the deceased when they die and return back to him? Who sends the prophets and the messengers and the clear signs and proofs for anyone with any intellect whatsoever and a sincere heart? There's also the guidance myth. So one of the tricks of shaitan is when he makes people think that no revelation is needed. Organized religion, he says. And of course, you look at your life and you look at morality. You look at what society is fighting about and the conflicts of understanding good and evil. And you recognize how deceptive this myth is. And of course, there's the false hope. This is when someone already believes in Allah. It's a Muslim, but they think Allah will just forgive everything. So they commit major sins and major crimes. They break every type of law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although they may follow all the worldly laws. They respect the worldly laws. And so someone here has planted something that contradicts what the Quran states, what the Quran says so clearly. There's a reality check we all need, so ask yourself right now, what are some deeds, maybe think of 2 or 3, that you are certain of, you're confident, these are purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're not for show, they're not for praise, and they're not for any worldly gain, they are just for Allah. Think of these things. Think of the investment perspective as well. What does a smart investor do? And so you think of this world's investment, maybe 60 to 80 years for some people, maximum 110, 120. And the returns are uncertain. Everything is left behind. There's a high risk of loss. But when you think of the afterlife, in terms of the investment, you'll have eternal returns, guaranteed by Allah. Nothing is left behind, and there's zero risk with a sincere intention. Which investment makes more sense? A drop of water or the entire ocean? Today's world sells us instant gratification. Get what you want when you want it. material success. In fact, that defines some people. Self-indulgence, it's all about desires. Live for the now. Be spontaneous and forget about the consequences later on, morally or otherwise. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is offering what? Eternal satisfaction, lasting success, self-discipline. You'll become a better person through submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you live for eternity. You don't just live for this world. There are a lot of different ways to remind ourselves every single day. And so you may, for example, go to the local janazas often, the funerals in your community. You may, for example, write certain goals that are related to your departure from this world, and you keep them in front of you. You might be reviewing your deeds. You're using a habit tracking app. So you're reviewing all your good deeds that you're trying to develop and master. And of course, you question major decisions. You turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you ask for guidance. Before every purchase, you ask, will this matter in my grave? Before every action, is this for Allah? Before every decision, how does this affect my standing on the Day of Judgment? There is going to be an investment transfer. Everyone has to transfer their wealth to the next life. And how do they do it? Through their deeds. So the one who gives in charity is transferring. The one who gives sadaqah, zakah, they're transferring. But also the one who transfers time. How? Through worship. The time you use to worship Allah, you're transferring investments, the greatest currency for the Day of Judgment. Transferring of relationships to the next life through da'wah. And so one of the great scholars, he said, zuhud, asceticism, is to leave that which does not benefit you in the next life. Think about it. Those who use a lot of streaming platforms for movies and TV shows and binge watching, or that social media scroll, doom scrolling and brain rotting, just constantly scrolling, or that pointless argument, pointless fights, the pointless conflict, or those extra 4 to 5 hours of sleep, or 3 hours for some people. What if we invested that time into extra prayers, helping others, learning Quran, building our afterlife, developing ourselves and developing the entirety of the ummah, strategizing, all for the sake of Allah? Remember the power of this promise. Every promise of Allah is true, and every word of Allah is certain. Every guarantee of Allah is secure. We trust a lot of promises in this world. Bank promises that your money is safe. Insurance promises in some parts of the world. Human promises. Sometimes people trust these more than the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So brothers and sisters, take immediate action. If you have to delete a time-wasting app that you're aware of, schedule your next Quran class or an hour of Quran every day. Start your Sadaqah Jariyah project, your weekly goals. Audit your time, where it's going. How is it being tracked? Review your investments for the afterlife. Plan your path to paradise and be very intentional with it. Write down the goals that will change your afterlife and connect the goals of this world to your meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what you leave behind of a legacy of inspiration and Sadaqah Jariyah. Before you go about your day or before you sleep later tonight, ask yourself, if tomorrow doesn't arrive for me, and if tonight is my last, if the angel of death visits now, what did I send ahead? وَلْتَنْظُرُ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Allah commands us, let every soul reflect. What did you send for tomorrow? The promise of Allah is true. The promise of Allah is true. The promise of Allah is true. So don't allow another sunset to find you unprepared. This world is but a shadow of what's to come. So make sure you're investing in the real part of the journey, the eternal part of the destination. And we ask Allah to grant us success. Allahumma ameen.